With information like this, Cardassia could launch a major counterattack against the Klingons.
They could, but they won't.
Why not?
The Detapa Council has something else in mind. They've ordered me not to engage the Klingons in any further conflict. The Council is looking for a diplomatic solution. They've ordered me to return to Cardassia Prime to resume my post as military advisor.
Well, I thought that's what you wanted.
It was. But what is the point of being a military advisor to a government that won't fight?
Well, you can change their minds. Convince your fellow Cardassians to go on the offensive.
Nah, I'd be wasting my breath. They wouldn't listen to me. No one wants to fight. There was a time when the mere mention of my race inspired fear. And now, we're a beaten people. Afraid to fight back because we don't want to lose what little is left.
It's not the Cardassians I know.
What Cardassians? Don't you see, Major? They're paralyzed. They're beaten and defeated. I am the only Cardassian left. And if no one else will stand against the Klingons, I will.
Everybody to Deep Space Pride, a gay Star Trek podcast. My name is Mike. I am one of your hosts, and with me here live is Johnson.
You know they can't see us, right? You're like making all these hand gestures.
Well, at least I'm not, at least you haven't checked your hair.
Oh, that's true.
Because that's usually when we record these on
You're
video.
using your hands a lot. I don't know what's happening.
I don't know. I'm
fine.
very trying to build up my energy.
You're very emphatic. Yeah.
I'm very emphatic.
Yes. Hi, Mike. I'm here in person with you.
We are. We're recording live. We are
Well, live, as in by the time that people listen to this, it's going to be like a while.
Right, because we're doing some vacation pre-recording.
Yes. So for our listeners, you are basically getting a visit back in time. It's like your time traveling to the past. Is July 5th. And we are doing some early recordings because Mike and Dennis are going on vacation for 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's right.
And you're abandoning me. It's fine.
Yes. I'm abandoning work. I'm abandoning New York.
Wait, but our listeners should also know that we are going to be participating in IDIC panel. Do you know anything about it that you could, off the top of your head, that you want to tell our listeners about it?
Well, so we are doing this podcast live. It's live streamed.
It's more of a live stream.
Yeah, it's live streamed.
It's a podcast festival. I think that's how they're positioning it.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And with a diversity of different podcasts and hosts and topics, all revolving around the infinite diversity and infinite combinations kind of philosophy of Star Trek.
Correct.
And so for our listeners, we will...
and it's with Women at Warp, which is...
Yes.
What?
It's another podcast.
I'm like, what are they?
Yeah, it's another podcast.
We were not prepared to do this promotion.
We were not. Should we stop and re-record all of this?
No, it's good. You know, our listeners are getting to hear us as we kind of talk out loud.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that's totally our jam. So
yeah,
that's okay.
we do a lot of talking out loud.
Wait, so by the time that people listen to this, it's going to be right before, I think. It's going to be right before we participate in that festival.
No, this particular episode that we're recording right now is coming out Friday before this Sunday that we are recording. Broadcasting, live streaming, whatever you want to call it.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, this is Fridays before the Sunday.
Right.
So if you listen to our podcast on time.
Yes, exactly. It's like listen to or watch us this weekend.
Yeah.
Yes.
But most likely you won't. We'll do some promotions on social media, but we will actually get the audio and video of that broadcast, and we'll put it out as a future podcast.
Yes, watch us this weekend on YouTube, URL unknown.
Check our social media accounts. We'll post it there and let you know where to tune in, and you can see us live. So this is the only thing I am doing on vacation is doing this podcast.
Correct.
I am breaking my rule. I am bringing my laptop and microphone and camera so that we can produce a high quality podcast for the people who are going to live stream with us, but also for all of you listeners now. In a future podcast, we'll release it there on our feeds. So yeah, that's my only technological thing that I'm doing this whole 2 weeks.
But for that reason, you have to bring your whole setup.
I do have to bring my whole setup because I thought I could possibly just do it on an iPad, and it can be done, but I'm really concerned about the quality, and I really want to make us look good, right?
Yeah, because the last thing we want is to look stupid.
Right. We can do that on our own. Not on the internet. It's not live on the internet.
No, but wait, what were there were like rules around this. We're no cursing.
Yeah, we have to behave ourselves.
No cursing. We can't use bad language.
Yeah. We have to just be aware of our language.
Yes.
Which we're less likely to do on our own
I'm
podcast.
so cognizant. I'm always aware of how I sound to people all the time.
Are you?
Am I? I'm not sure.
I don't know that that's the case. I think you talk.
I can filter myself.
Really? Okay.
Okay.
Well, this will be a great exercise in that. It's a very planned out podcast though as well, whereas most of our podcasts are a lot more off the cuff.
Correct.
Some of it's planned out, obviously, but yeah, it'll be much more planned out. We have a 1 hour time slot, and we have to stay within that time slot.
Oh my god.
So we have to time it, and plan it out, and make sure that we know our stuff.
Ugh.
I was gonna say shit, but we might as well start practicing better language now. Because I did make that mistake on Infinite Track. I did say shit.
Oh yeah, you weren't supposed to.
Yeah, when I was talking.
I didn't curse.
You did not. You were really well behaved.
I was so good.
Yeah,
so good.
So you have to channel that same sort of energy for this podcast.
Except it's not going to have to be 3 hours this time.
That's correct. It's just 1 hour.
That was exhausting.
But I'm getting up early on Sunday morning,
Just
Hawaii time, because there
that.
was 6 hours difference. And just for that. And then, yeah.
Huge sacrifice.
Huge sacrifice, but I think it'll be great because more people get to see us, hopefully.
Wait, is it going to be, what time is it going to be in Hawaii? Like 9, 6? Not 6.
Not
No,
6.
8.
8. I think we'll get online
8.
at 8. We're live at 8:30 Hawaii time, which is 2:30 your time.
Right.
So on Sunday.
So what is Dennis going to do?
Dennis said he'd either go for a run or go explore for a little while. So
Oh, that's fine.
yeah, because he doesn't like to listen to us talk about Star Trek
No,
at all.
that's not his thing.
Not at all. So yeah.
Which is
so that's coming up on July 16th at 2:30 Eastern.
Is that the right date?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe so. Sunday, July 16th.
That's incorrect.
It's incorrect?
It's July 18th. July 18th. July 18th is the Sunday. Yes, I have it on my calendar.
Okay.
Women at Warp live panel
There we go. All right.
at
So
2:30 Eastern.
So it's Sunday, July 18th
That's correct.
at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time.
Yes.
Figure it out in your own time slot wherever you are, but there's if we were super smart people, we would do it in GMT, but we're not going to do it that way. Which
no.
is
Isn't that just an hour behind?
7:30 p.m. GMT. I think.
Oh wait, GMT is London time, right?
It's like
UK
right?
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's 6 hours ahead.
Yeah.
Correct.
5 or 6 hours. I forget.
6. Wait, 5. I don't know.
5 right now. 'cause
I don't know.
daylight
I don't know anymore.
Anyway,
Whatever.
we've rambled on about nothing for 7 minutes now, so maybe we should.
No, this is informative for our listeners.
It was also informative for us.
No, they need to know.
Yes, they do. So moving on, though, I thought, we're in July now, and I love.
It's no longer Pride Month.
It's no longer Pride Month, but Pride is year round.
Sure.
And although I thought that these questions that we had were kind of cool. So they're not Pride prompts, but I thought we'd just come up with random Star Trek related questions on things that we could have a quick discussion about, just to create some curiosity. So my this week's question is, who would you choose to be your best friend from Star Trek?
That's right.
And we went back and forth and talked this out a little bit to work out our ideas, because surprise, surprise, Johnson's default answer is always going to be Data.
I know. Well, Data's so
Always.
helpful.
But I challenged him to come up with someone different, and he did.
Yes, I did.
So who would you choose to be your best friend in Star Trek, and why?
I'm not sure this is that necessarily surprising, but
No.
I would say that my bestie would probably be Brad Boimler. I think that he is. It's because like he and I have so many similarities, like in so many ways. We're both like neurotic about things.
Yes.
We both like freak out about things. I don't know. It's just like, you know, he also has a certain level of ambition similar to me. Like it's not like super ambitious, but we both still want to succeed and do well. So I think that we would kind of get along, and I would totally relate to his reactions and his freakouts, and I would also do the same.
Yes.
So
do you
I
think
think
there would be any competition between the two of you, though?
It's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that that's okay. I think
Yeah.
that there can always be a little bit of competition. I think like, I can get competitive with friends. I think when you're talking to, when you are with peers and when people like similar in personality, sometimes there could be a little bit of competition, but I think that's okay.
Okay.
So yeah, that would be my pick in terms of who
I could see the two of you being besties and
we would get
hanging
along.
out in what is it called? What's the lounge on the Cerritos called?
Oh, I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
The version 10 forward.
Yes, their version of 10 forward. Well, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you? Who would your best friend be?
I'm going back and forth. I have two choices. But before you said Boimler, I immediately, before you even thought of Boimler, I had already come up with Mariner.
Of course.
I love Mariner. One, I love Tawny Newsome, but also I think that Mariner would challenge me in a way, like to get outside of my comfort zone and to do things that are a little bit more risky, but also have a bigger payoff. And I think that just like she does with Brad Boimler, she helps him grow. Mm-hmm. And I like that sort of challenge. So I think for me, my first choice would be Mariner. But I also, at the same time, as we were kind of going down the rabbit hole of you always saying Data, I was like, you can't choose Spock either.
Yeah.
But then when I said Spock, I actually thought of Ethan Peck's Spock, which then made me think of number one. And I actually think that number one would be a great, like, best friend, like, travel buddy, coworker. So
she's very well put together.
Yeah. And she's also got this, like, sarcastic sense of humor, and so I think I would vibe with that, too.
I don't think I know her well enough as a character yet. We've only seen her like a small handful of times.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm excited to see more of her in Strange New Worlds. But I can see that.
I'm actually I think out of what we know so far about Strange New Worlds, I am the most excited to see more about her.
Oh, okay.
We already know, obviously, Spock, and we
Of
also
course.
know Pike. So
Right.
I think she'll be one of the most interesting. Like, for me, we don't know anything about the rest of the cast or the crew of the Enterprise. So we
know
have
nothing.
no idea about that piece
nothing.
of it.
Zero.
So it'll be interesting to learn more about them.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, potentially, they have that intern or that cadet who, remember in the short trek?
Oh, yeah,
so
yes.
she joined the Enterprise and went into the TARDIS-looking engineering room, which looks nothing like the original.
Nothing. Not at all.
But that's, that is a whole nother
Conversation.
So yeah, all right. So there's a little fun before we get into our underappreciated episodes of Deep Space Nine, right?
What are you doing?
I am switching over to make sure we have the definition of our underappreciation that we finally came up with.
Okay.
So, so as we let's transition into our
Or underappreciated episode DS9.
Yes, sorry. Totally, you threw me off. I was like pulling up the notes, and here we go.
I can see why my father likes having you around.
I think you should stick with the Cardassian rifle. Smaller, easier to use, and if we get boarded, I don't want you to have to think too much about the weapon you're using.
You don't like my father very much, do you?
No, I don't.
I understand. He did some very bad things during the occupation.
Yes, he did.
It bothers him, you know.
Does it?
Very much. He talks about it sometimes. He'd never admit it to anyone else, but he thinks the occupation was a mistake.
Somehow, I don't think he'd say that if the Cardassians had won.
Maybe not. But maybe losing made him a better person.
Well, then a lot of innocent people died for his education.
So yeah, this
we decided to talk about, or at least we talked a little bit about how we were defining an underappreciated episode, right?
Correct. Yeah, because we kept on going back and forth. We've gotten a little bit of feedback online for is this an underappreciated episode or not? We've even asked the question. I think in the last episode or 2 episodes ago said I actually appreciate this much less.
Yes.
As I kind of digested it, but also talked about it. So we finally came up with a definition. Do you remember what it is, or do you want me to read what we came up with?
Yeah, no, basically, and I think by all accounts, an underappreciated episode would be an episode that is not a standout. It is not, if you were to ask, what stood out to you in season 3 of this series, right? It would be an episode that does not necessarily come to mind as a big pivotal episode or memorable episode for that season. So, for example, we'll be talking about season 4 of Deep Space Nine.
Yeah. And
season 4 had a lot of great episodes. It had With a Warrior, right?
Yeah.
That's correct. It had The Visitor. It had, what else did it have? It had other episodes.
There are a lot.
There are many other episodes actually in season 4 that you were like, I totally remember that episode. It's memorable. It's in the discourse, blah, blah, blah. But there are many other episodes that are quality and good that you would need to be reminded of because it's not like a bad episode. Right. It's just not an episode that you're like, I remember that episode right off the cuff. So I think that's how we are defining it.
Yes, exactly.
And there's still a little bit of subjectivity in there, obviously, but I think that by kind of putting those parameters in place, I think that we at least have a better idea as to how we're defining an underappreciated episode.
Yeah, definitely. And going back into season 4, hopefully really quickly here. But for this one, we went back and forth on 2 of them, right?
We did.
So you came up with you came up with one, and then as I was kind of going through it, and for those of you who use Netflix to watch Star Trek, which I do, they have the absolute worst descriptions of these episodes ever. So we went back and forth, but the one that I thought about was Crossfire, which actually happens right before Return to Grace. Return to Grace is episode... technically, it's episode 14. Crossfire is episode 13.
And I proposed Return to Grace originally.
Yes, you did, yeah.
And then you were like, what about Crossfire? And I was like, I don't remember Crossfire. And then I watched Crossfire, and then I liked it. And then I was like, let's talk about Crossfire. And then you were like, actually, let's talk about Return to Grace.
Yeah.
So it was very roundabout.
Yeah, we kind of went back and forth.
Yes.
And they're both really great episodes. And
very different.
Completely different.
Very, very
But
different,
I think, where Crossfire was a little bit more nuanced and gets into some emotional areas and whole best friend and falling in love with people that you work with, but also that you have had a long personal relationship or working relationship with. So there's all of that. But when I watched Return to Grace, I was super excited about the banter. The banter and the interactions are so classic and so awesome. I mean, the Kira Dukat dichotomy right from the beginning of the episode is just, I mean, it's a really well-written episode. So that's why we ended up with Return to Grace.
Do you want to give our listeners a quick summary?
Yeah, well, I mean, the horrible Netflix summary of...
Why use Netflix? Use, like, Memory Alpha or something.
Oh, well,
Fine, use the Netflix one. It's already up.
This is just a quick way to look at the episodes.
All right, it's fine.
I mean, this is, at First Minister Shakar's request, Kira prepares to travel to a Cardassian outpost to share Bajoran intelligence about the Klingon Empire. Now, the whole piece of that missing is that the ship that she's put on is a Cardassian freighter, and Gul Dukat is the captain of that freighter.
Correct.
So,
it doesn't even mention Gul Dukat.
It doesn't even mention Gul Dukat at all, which is amazing. And the pictures for these episodes are both Kira with, you know, and an undisclosed, undetermined location. So,
love undisclosed locations.
So
undescript
yes.
locations. It's like, where am I? Where is she?
So let's talk about Return to Grace, because I think it's a little more exciting of an episode. It's got a lot more action.
Sure.
So what are some of your early thoughts on? Well, you just rewatched it.
Yes. We both rewatched it. What are you talking about?
Yeah, we did. And you know, one thing I will say, and we talked a little bit about this at lunch, was that it's hard to, like, watching these one-offs of Deep Space Nine, you realize, like, how serialized it is.
Correct.
Because there are lots of nuances in the episode as far as references back to previous episodes.
Yeah. Versus when we were doing our underappreciated episode rewatch of TNG, they were all very standalone.
Yes.
And it was easier to actually talk about them without necessarily needing to dip back into older episodes. Whereas here, there's so many references to, like, old events or previous episodes from the last season, things like that, that if you don't have that history, it would be very confusing.
Yeah, and I don't remember, for instance, I have no idea how Gul Dukat got demoted.
So it was because of Ziyal.
Is it? Okay. That's what I sort of inferred from the episode, but I couldn't remember, like, I didn't remember the exact instance where that happened. So that's a big one, because Ziyal is also in this episode.
Correct.
You know, right from the get-go, like, when Dukat shows up at Kira's quarters in the beginning of the episode to pick her up, very if you awkward, uncomfortable, like, what the hell?
Because if you don't remember the episode, so basically that episode, like, it was the name of that episode was Indiscretion, and essentially what happened was Kira was helping Dukat find this missing transport, I think. And he doesn't reveal it, but eventually you find out that Dukat had a Bajoran lover who was killed in the transport crash or something, and that they also had a daughter together, and she's been missing, and she was being held captive by the Breen. So the Breen were mentioned briefly in this episode, but the Breen basically were they were operating as slaves under the Breen, and Ziyal was one of them. And in that episode, Kira finds out that Gul Dukat had this lover, had this affair, and that he had a daughter that was half Bajoran, half Cardassian, and he wanted to kill Ziyal because it was like to wrap up loose ends, but also because he knew that if people found out that Ziyal existed and that he had this affair, that would be a problem, and that he would basically get demoted from Gul. And so that was, like, the whole point. And then at the end, obviously, you know, he sees Ziyal and he can't kill her. And Kira also plays a big part in that. So that's what happened. So along the way, they kind of, it's, you know, I wouldn't call it a friendship by any means, because it's not. But it's kind of like they learn to kind of at least get along a little bit. So that
they're
not
like divorced parents almost.
A little bit. So it's not just like, you know, obviously there's a lot of tension between them, but through this experience, they at least tolerate one another, and Gul Dukat is appreciative that Kira helps convince him to not kill Ziyal, and Kira is able to see this new side of Dukat a little bit.
Yes.
So I think that, again, I think it was emphasized in this episode that Kira does not like Dukat, but at least he didn't, he wasn't as two-dimensional for her because there was this backstory.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why, yes, when Dukat came into her quarters, they weren't just like about to kill each other. They were.
No, I wasn't worried about that. It was just awkward. Like,
it was still awkward. It's still
very awkward. And Dukat doesn't work to make anything less awkward.
No.
In fact, he likes to amp it up to make it more awkward.
He's a total instigator.
It's just, I was really like thrown off by that opening, having not known about it from the.
I should probably told you to watch.
Yeah, probably if we weren't recording these all, to get prepared for vacation, would have had more time to kind of. Because as we did in Next Generation, I jumped around and watched a few other episodes in that season, got a flavor for the season. This time I didn't have time to really watch a ton of.
Right.
I did watch Crossfire, but as a decision point between the two episodes, on which one to talk about. So I think the most disturbing thing about that opening scene is that Kira gives him, he asks her to carry her luggage, and she gives it to him, and that just blows my mind. The former Gul of Deep Space Nine is carrying Major Kira's luggage to his ship.
Yeah. Now he's a lowly freighter captain.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like, what the heck is happening here?
Yeah.
But I think, from then on, it kind of, there's definitely a lot of dynamic conversations between the two. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, did you have a favorite in that episode? Favorite conversation that they had?
I'm trying to think. Like, I think that, I'm trying to, I don't have that. So, I did appreciate Dukat's monologue towards the end where he's trying to convince Kira to join him. And, he's basically trying to appeal to the resistance fighter in her.
Yes, yeah.
And trying to relate to her that way.
Yeah.
I think the larger thing for me, and having rewatched all of Deep Space Nine in 3 months last year, is basically, it's more, what's really fascinating about Gul Dukat's character is that, and there's conversations between Kira and Ziyal in this episode where Ziyal is expressing her perspective on Dukat, obviously,
right? Yeah,
from her perspective as his daughter, and she
very much hero worships him to a large extent.
And I think the really interesting about Dukat's character that you see basically almost all the way to the end of I would say season 6 is that he sees himself as a very sympathetic person to the Bajorans, where it's like weird, right? But basically he maintains this whole idea that he was a sympathetic overseer and that the Bajorans should be thankful that he was so kind to them. And this finally this comes to a head in I think that's is it season 5 or season 6 episode. It's Waltz, where basically he and, I don't know if you remember this episode, but he and Cisco get kind of marooned on this planet. And by this time, Dukat's going crazy. Like, he's like losing his mind and he's seeing people. But it comes to a head in that episode because he finally realizes that he hates the Bajoran people. But all the way up to that point, he thinks that he sees himself, he has a savior complex where he thinks that he was actually doing a favor to Bajoran people, like in terms of helping to lead the occupation, helping to bring them out of like what he sees as the Stone Ages, but then also that he was, he prevented them from suffering more than they could have under someone else's rule. So he has this whole idea in his mind that he's not only like a true Cardassian, as he says in this episode, but that he is a hero. That he is someone that the Bajorans should actually respect and pay tribute to versus being this villain. that most of the Bajorans, including Kira, see him as. So you see that kind of subtly, like in a subtle way in this, and it kind of escalates more and more, like as he kind of becomes more imbalanced. Because what happens in like season 5 or season 6 is I really don't remember when Waltz was, but that was after Ziyal was killed, and he started becoming very unbalanced. So that's what eventually leads to him kind of him going crazy, and kind of seeking out the power race to kind of like
right, and the ruin
what happened in that and all that.
Yeah.
But even here you kind of see him being like, I'm a resistance fighter, I'm like I'm here to help my people, and like I just think that his character is just so fascinating, and you see a lot of that in a lot of the dialogue, a lot of the conversations that he has.
Well, from what I remember in this episode, he doesn't really see himself as a resistance fighter until she kind of prompts that and says, oh, you can do this, like you can do that, you need to learn. Like I think she brings out that resistance fighter in him. Well,
this is also when after he realizes that the Cardassian leadership is not going to do anything. Right.
Oh, right, yeah. Remember? When he provides, once they've captured the Klingon ship, and
that's when he was like, I'm the only true Cardassian left.
Right. Like, yeah. So he continues that sort of savior mentality, like he's the only person that can save Cardassia now.
Right.
So the other question I had is, the tete-a-tete with Kira is playful banter for a lot of the episode until it kind of tips over into that area where he becomes this more freedom fighter and or resistance fighter, not even freedom fighter. But my question is, and I'm not sure I know the answer to this. I get the feeling that he has feelings for Kira, but I don't know if he's just instigating things with her or not.
Oh yeah, I totally think that. Honestly, I think that he does. Well, I don't know if you remember, but a later episode, I think a season 6 episode, it's revealed that he had an affair with Kira's mother.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So I think that.
So he sort of has a, well, obviously, because Ziyal is here at this point in the show, so he's definitely had. He has a fascination with Bajoran women.
Yeah.
Which would almost make him very unusual in Cardassian society, I would think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just get this really, I can't tell if he fancies her, if he likes her and wants to like, make her, or not make, but wants to be with her in a romantic way, or whether he's just being his like devious, instigating self.
No.
Because she plays off of that, and she basically says, never in a million years will that ever happen. But he still tries.
No.
So, it's an interesting, that's the most, that for me is like the confusing and interesting part of this episode is just the dynamic between the two, and how, in the end, it all leads up to the point where you said he gives this big monologue. And in the end, I think what Kira realizes is that that's the old her and not the new her. And she's actually sort of, not, I wouldn't say ashamed of her past, but she's moving past it.
Yeah.
We did talk about, when we talked about the Kaiopaka episode from season 1, she was still very much dealing with the transition of becoming an officer and working on Deep Space Nine versus being a freedom fighter. And now I think in season 4, she's reached that point where she's accepted her past and does not want to relive it. Like she's been there, done that, and that's sort of the end. So she flat out denies him, and that sort of drives him a little bit crazy as well. I think that rejection of him, her rejection of him.
Yeah, but then I think that the fact that Kira then wants to take Ziyal under her wing, and that kind of ties them together, also makes him feel like, oh, like our destinies are linked together or something like that,
Yeah.
you know? Because you do see like in I get all my seasons mixed up now. I think it's season 6, like when the Dominion has occupied Deep Space Nine.
Right, yeah, it is.
Because they have a lot of banter and back and forth, like especially over Ziyal. And I think that they kind of grow in some ways closer together, like Dukat and Kira. Because Kira needs to play nice. And
Right, yeah.
she's
representing the Bajorans
right.
at that point.
And and Dukat also needs to respect that. And they kind of there's this element where they need to walk on eggshells around each other. But the fact that Ziyal is there and they both care about Ziyal kind of allow, they do kind of almost operate as like dysfunctional parents with Ziyal.
Yeah.
And I think that gives Dukat some hope that there's a future for them, like in his mind.
Yeah.
Like that they have a chance together somehow.
Yeah, in this episode, they're sort of much more like newly divorced parents who are like kind of both want to see the best for Ziyal, but have very different opinions about how to go about doing that.
Yeah.
But it's definitely very interesting. What do you think about the relationship between Kira and Ziyal in this episode?
Oh, yeah. No, I think it's really interesting because Kira does have, because of the experience that they went through to save Ziyal, I think that Kira has this natural, like, she's naturally protective of Ziyal. But she is also, to what you were saying earlier, because of Ziyal's role as Dukat's daughter, there's this natural tension because Kira sees Dukat as this monster.
Right.
But she also needs to respect the fact that Ziyal is his daughter, and
she hero worships her father. Very
and then
so.
Kira also knows that she can't possibly expect Ziyal to kind of see Dukat the way that she sees Dukat.
Yeah.
So there is that, because they have a few conversations where Kira just needs to be like, you can't. I don't expect you to understand the way that I see your father.
Yeah.
But at the same time, ultimately, I think that Kira really does care for Ziyal quite a bit, which is why, like she was like, at the end, she was like, you can't make her, to Dukat, Kira was like, you can't make Ziyal kind of live through this because, she can't, I don't want her to live the life that I had.
Right. Yeah.
So, I think that they have a great relationship. And you definitely see it much more, like a little bit. I wish we saw Ziyal more actually, because after she moves to Deep Space Nine, we don't actually see that much of her. But there are a few moments between now and when Ziyal dies in season 6, that we get to see Kira kind of operate like as a mom figure, mother figure to her.
Well, and she definitely does that when she sort of does that as a soldier / mom, when she's showing Ziyal the different weapons, and the value of the Cardassian weapon versus the Starfleet weapon, and what could possibly go wrong, and also how to look at it from a useful standpoint as a rebel versus as someone who, when you're out in the wild, you need something that will just work.
Yeah,
and whereas the Starfleet one has many more options, but which means that many more ways to break. So I thought that was a interesting little conversation just on her teaching her how to fight other people with a live weapon.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting. Yeah, I definitely get the mom figure, the mentor figure of that, and that comes across, and definitely like one of the things about, like we said, like, this is such a contextual episode. It relies on the backstory, which I didn't have time to watch, but also watching these intermittent episodes as we've planned out for Deep Space Nine has definitely made me want to go back and rewatch.
You should totally watch the whole thing. It's very watchable.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And and I'm sort of stuck at a place in Enterprise where I'm like, do I like, I don't know if I'm
season
invested.
3.
Yeah, I just don't know if I'm invested in season 3 of Enterprise yet or not. But anyway, that's another whole topic. So, anything else on Return to Grace that you can think of?
Yeah, I think we talked about most of it. I think that some of the action because the other thing that's really going on in this season is the Klingon War, and the fact that the Klingons have broken off their treaty with the Federation, and that they're kind of just doing their own thing now, and they're attacking. They're going after the Cardassians, but even after Federation ships, like it's like that's the whole backdrop of this season, and then this is when we eventually found out that there's a changeling towards the end. I think this is towards the end of the season. They find out that there's a changeling in the Klingon. I don't remember if it was the Klingon High Council. Was someone the High Council? I think so.
Wasn't it Gowron?
Was it Gowron?
I thought it was.
I don't remember.
Okay. That's my vague recollection of
Gowron
that.
was no, I don't think it was Gowron.
Okay.
I don't think it was Gowron. No. It wasn't
Again,
Gowron. It was like an advisor to Gowron, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, it was someone pretty high up. And like it was they were helping to cause dissension inside the Clan Empire, but then also between the Clan Empire and the other powers in the Alpha Quadrant.
Got it.
So, and then that's when, once they figure that out, they're like, oh, okay. Like, it's all the Dominion, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So you also mentioned, if you're jumping around or if you haven't watched Deep Space Nine, I don't know, like this is a great episode, but I don't know that you could just jump in and watch this episode. Certainly not without at least having some backstory on Deep Space Nine, but apparently also a key episode would be Indiscretion. Is that the
Indiscretion would be the lead up to this one.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that overall, I know we talked about this before. Dukat is probably one of the most interesting characters, like secondary characters in Deep Space Nine, and I think that this is one of the stepping stones to his character arc overall. It may not be one of like the I remember that particular episode, like as you probably did not remember, when you went back, but you were like, oh, this was actually important in at least the development of his character, his relationship with Kira, his relationship with Ziyal. I think it was definitely one of the building blocks to us seeing him more as a character than kind of just as a Cardassian figure. So I think that it is pivotal in that respect, even if it is somewhat underappreciated.
Yeah, I also think that one of the things about Deep Space Nine, we have mentioned before, like the plethora of secondary characters that they have. But I think, one of the reasons why they took this route with Gul Dukat is because Mark Alamo plays him so well.
Yeah.
Definitely from
good.
an acting standpoint, he nails it every time. And I think that's part of the reason why the writers wrote so many episodes for him and brought him back, because really, I mean, there was no need for them to bring back the Cardassians after they left Bajor, even though they were the next sector over or whatever, so I think certainly the acting, and as we get into the other episodes of underappreciated episodes of Deep Space Nine, I definitely have more thoughts on this as far as who plays Wayun and things like that.
Oh, wait, and this is also one of the first times I think we see Damar.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Who here is just like the helmsman or something.
Yeah.
He has a very minor role.
Yeah, I noticed that right away. And
he becomes so.
Is
important.
that his first episode? You think?
I think it is. I think it's one of his first appearances, if not
Okay.
the first. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then he becomes so important later.
Yeah, he definitely does. It was funny. I recognized Damar, and I, again, not having watched all the episodes in a long time, I didn't know whether this was his first episode or not. So, very cool. So, great underappreciated episode for season 4 of Deep Space Nine, Return to Grace. Definitely check it out as part of a rewatch or a selected rewatch if you.
I mean, there's a lot of good stuff in season 4.
There is, yeah. Which is why I really think that I'm going to have to go back and just start watching Deep Space Nine from the beginning
It's
again.
so good. It's so good.
There is so much goodness in it. And these little dips into each season are just great reminders of why Deep Space Nine is such a great show. Very cool. Well, shall we take a quick pause and talk about our
Sponsor?
Thank you.
Wow. I was like, I think you were going to talk about fan sets.
Yes, I was going to talk about fan sets, and I totally could not think of the word sponsor for some reason. So Fansets sponsors the Trek Geeks Podcast Network and Deep Space Pride.
Yes.
And I was actually just looking. I was curious if there were any new Deep Space Nine pins. There are not, but they've got some really great pins. A lot of micro crew. As I've already shared before, I do have the Women of Trek Jadzia Dax from Series 2, because obviously she is one of my favorite. I mean, there's so many...
Is there a Ziyal pin?
Oh, that's a great question. Let's see.
Just going along with the theme of this episode?
No, there isn't. The newest one I would say is Lieutenant Nog is the newest one, which will become apparent in our season 6 episode. But yeah, they have a Jem'Hadar. They have a Gul Dukat.
Oh,
they do have a Gul Dukat. Kira in her red uniform. Although, yeah, which is kind of her standard uniform. As we kind of talk about, it was in the previous episode.
Which one? The previous one we talked about?
No, the previous one to this one, Crossfire.
That one.
She wore some different outfits, and actually it was really.
Well, she was wearing it was
a
it's
blue,
more formal.
Blue formal.
It
uniform.
was
yeah. But the pin here has got her in her standard red uniform, and they have Garrick too. So yeah.
Actually, speaking of Crossfire, because that was where we see Kira's relationship with Shakar really blossom.
Yeah.
Dukat made a lot of.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, a lot of barbs at Shakar.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny, but I think
and
this goes back to him kind of just instigating and trying to
definitely
annoy Kira.
Yes, but also being super nosy, and like
Very
he
nosy.
still has his ears on what's going on in Deep Space Nine. So, yeah, that was kind of like, how the hell would he know? He's like a lowly captain now and showing up and like
He might have connections. Yeah.
So anyway, check out fansets.com. Put a bunch of pins in your cart. If you put in more than $30, you'll get free shipping in the U.S. And if you use the code DS Pride.
No, Deep Space isn't. Oh, is it DS Pride or?
Yes, it's DS.
Oh, whoops! I forgot our code.
Oh my god!
It's just DS Pride.
It's
okay.
DS Pride.
Okay.
You'll get 10%
off. Correct.
Yes, there you go.
All caps.
All caps. Correct.
Yes.
So definitely go and check them out. They do have new pins released on the 1st and 15th of every month, and so go check them out. They've got a great bunch of Deep Space Pride pins.
Deep Space 9 pins. Goodness.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so check out Fansets, and we thank Fansets for sponsoring the Trek Geeks Podcast Network and Deep Space Pride.
Thanks, Fansets.
All right. Well, that pretty much wraps up this episode. Why don't you, Johnson, tell our listeners how they can get in touch with us?
Yeah, so we would love to hear from you. You can reach us on social media, on Twitter and Instagram at Deep Space Pride, or you can email us at deepspacepride@gmail.com.
There we go. And we'll be back again next week talking about In the Cards, the penultimate episode of season 5.
Yes,
of Deep Space
it's
Pride.
all kind of blurring together because we're jumping around so much.
We are, yeah.
But it's fine.
So we'll talk about that next week, and we'll see you all then. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye, Riley.
Deep Space Pride is a production of Coconut Media Works. Executive producers Bill Smith and Dan Davidson. For more great Star Trek discussion, discover the other shows of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network at trekgeeks.com or find us in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
Coconut.